Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. This is the Hoops HD report.
Well, what the hell, Chad? Since when do you like Marquette?
Marquette.
The Eagles.
Wrong
No,
Eagles.
that's not Marquette. That's NC Central.
Oh, NC Central. Okay, now my mistake. That because Marquette's the Golden Eagles.
Well, I just thought you were trying to get after Lee Del Vecchio and supporting the Boston College, approach.
Yeah.
Come on, don't you all know it's Eastern Washington? It's always been Eastern Washington.
It's Eastern Washington. Yeah.
Report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by Joby Fortson and John Titel down there. John Slika up here. And that's it, everybody, right?
Why do you always forget me? It's like you don't want me here. Every week you forget me.
I keep trying, David. David Griggs here as well. And we've got a lot to go over this week's show, but I wanted to start with a piece of news that came out today. I guess it had actually been announced previously, but it is now official, so the details came out. That in the Final Four this year, there's something pretty interesting. There's going to be a national 3-on-3 tournament. The format is going to be 32 teams, 4 players each. I guess so you have one sub. And there will be one team representing each of the 32 conferences. So there will be a MEAC team, a SWAC team, as well as an ACC team, a Big Ten team, and the like. All seniors. So among other things, the players, because their careers are over, will be paid and be allowed to be paid for it. Games will all be streamed live on Twitter, except the championship round, which will be on ESPN2. But Titel, have you heard about this? And what are your thoughts on this event?
Man, I can't wait to turn on the old Twitter to watch the Southland SWAC matchup. That's going to be fantastic. The redeeming factor is I love the chance to see like a bunch of Ivy League guys go up against like Pac-12 guys just to see how they do, knowing that the best guys in the Pac-12 are not seniors. They're all the one-and-done guys. I don't love the money aspect. I suppose if the eligibility is over, I can allow it, but I also don't know like how they're going to be focused on final exams when they have money on the line. So call me mixed for now.
Joby, you agree with that? I don't know how much you read about.
No, I like the money.
Okay,
it's good for them. They're done with their schooling, and I don't know. I attended college, and my last semester was the easiest semester of my 4. I mean, you have my 8 semesters in college. So I mean, I'm not really worried about class on that end. I think it's a great thing. My one question, this is an honest question. I wish I'd done research in advance. How do you select who the ACC or the Big Ten or et cetera, the Southland, how do you select the teams that represent that conference? Do you have like a playoff tryouts? I mean, because what if more than 4 people want to – because it's 3 players with a bench player. How do you select them?
That's not detail I know. David, I don't know how much you read about it or not, but I don't know how they select them, but other than the criteria that it must be seniors so they can pay the kids.
Yeah, I don't really know how they go about and select them either. If they're playing for the conference and not a specific school, it might just be the ADs might vote on it. I don't know. I mean, maybe chances. It might be up to each individual conference how they want to go about doing it. A lot of the conferences I've been around, they'd probably open it up to each school's nomination, and then a committee decides among who's nominated who the 4 players are going to be. But I don't know that for sure. That's just me guessing.
It may be nothing more than the committee organizers placing a bunch of phone calls and choosing the 4 kids too, because this is not an official NCAA event. It's not NCAA sanctioned or anything like that. So, but who cares what the NCAA?
Who is sanctioning it? Like, who's doing this?
Some company.
Well, okay.
It's okay. It's not the Gazelle Group.
Oh, okay. As long as it's not the Gazelle Group.
There's going to be $100,000 of money available to be split up among the kids, not just a winner-take-all thing. But I think it's depending on how far you get in the event, you get more money as well. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think it'll be a fun little thing to watch the couple days leading up to the Final Four too.
Yeah. Now it's not in conjunction with the Final Four. It's done by a third party in proximity to the Final Four,
the same city as the Final Four.
Yeah, and at that point, well, I mean, it doesn't really matter what we do or don't think about it. I mean, they have every right to do it. The players have every right to play in it. It's happening. So what can you do about it?
And the interesting thing, John Titel, that I found is that I was familiar with there used to be a lot more 3-on-3 tournaments nationwide, and the team that was the most dominant 3-on-3 tournament team, they won over and over again, were former teammates from that Princeton team, sorry to cringe, that came so close against Georgetown. They were dominant 3-on-3 because they had the big and the small and could shoot from the outside. And they were running backdoor cut plays on 3-on-3. It was a lot of fun. Who knows if that sort of thing can then recreate itself, and all of a sudden the Ivy League becomes the big champion here. Who knows?
It's going to be funny when the Penn point guard has a choice of passing to the Princeton shooting guard and says, no, I'm not giving it to Princeton because of the big rivalry. Money be damned.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, though. Let's go and talk about some of the games that happened this past week and some of the stuff that's coming up the next week as well. And I'm going to go ahead and pull the standings up on the screen here, and we'll start in the ACC because that's what's on the screen. Where David, we just saw tonight before we started Syracuse with a road win at Louisville. Is this Syracuse is still in contention for an NCAA bid, or is this a sign that Louisville is really just starting to fade after they had such a strong week or two before that?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I do believe that this is Louisville's, if I'm not mistaken, 4th loss in 5 games. It's either that or, I mean, they're certainly on the skid. So while I don't think Louisville is falling outside the bubble, I do think that their seed is slipping, so to speak, as is their profile. And Syracuse, oh my God. Well, you got it. I mean, they're 5-6. They're hovering around 500 in a real dominant league. They got a top 50 RPI. They had a really nice road win tonight. I mean, you got to think of them as at least being in the discussion. I don't think you could say that they're so far inside the bubble that they're completely safe, but they're definitely in it. I think tonight was a huge win for them, and it went from no way, which is what I would have said 24 hours ago, to, yeah, you got to look at them.
Well, Tytel, there's their profile, and suddenly they have that big hole, which is the quadrant 1 wins, finally filled in with something.
It is. They were off my bubble as of this weekend. I suppose they're crawling back onto it. But if you look in the remaining schedule, when you have all those top 20 teams, I believe 4 of their last 5, including 2 on the road, I mean, plenty of chances. And I didn't think they'd win tonight. But win on the road in the ACC, that shows a lot to me.
Well, speak about teams that continue to win. Joby, I'll put Clemson's profile up here. And
Love it.
After the injury, we were worried, can this team keep winning? But 2 more wins this week.
Clemson continues to play forward and says, hey, we don't mind if Grantham's not here, that we want a protected seed and maybe even better than just the 4th seed. I mean, they are playing strong. I mean, look at that profile. We have it up on the screen right now. That's pretty. Yeah, that at Ohio State's looking better and better by the day. Florida neutral court, so they did it out of conference. In conference, they're beating fellow tournament teams, North Carolina, Miami, and right now Louisville and NC State, I think, are both in the field right now. And what bad losses. I mean, Temple, it's not a great loss, but Temple's all of a sudden starting to string some wins together in the American, as we'll discuss later. People are really excited about that Temple team.
Yeah. We will discuss this later, but holy cow, Temple knocks off Tulane on Sunday, and wow, the city just. Oh wow! Well, we'll get to that later.
Stalika, Joby did mention that NC State team here. I put their profile on the screen as well. A team that also just keeps on winning games. This team was off of everybody's radar. They pretty much in the field at this point, barring a major collapse, or.
I would say not only is NC State in the field after beating Notre Dame, I would say they all but put the Irish out of their misery, given how they were able to get revenge from their loss in South Bend a couple weeks earlier.
David, can we put a nail in Notre Dame at this point?
We're getting very, very close. I mean, I didn't even categorically, nothing about them says they're a tournament team. And I realize that I always say to us when we're doing the committee, let's not do anything categorically, so I'm going to ignore my own advice. There is not one RPI quality win. There's just nothing there that indicates that they're a tournament team.
They beat Syracuse at one point.
Yeah.
That's not their profile, is it? They didn't. That's not their profile. Yeah, I mean, well, I stand corrected here. It looks like they have wins over Clemson, Duke, at North Carolina, and Arizona. That is the. Oh, wait a minute. Okay.
There's Notre Dame now. 3 quadrant 3 losses. Wichita State, Syracuse, the wins. I agree with you. I don't see much left here, but we did mention.
And I stress Indiana and Ball State were with Bonzie Colson, so you can't use the Bonzie Colson excuse there.
Bonzie Colson's not there now, so I mean.
Well, I mean, saying if he came back and everybody goes, "Oh, we should reevaluate him." All right, reevaluate him. Reevaluate. Indiana lost. Ball State at home. How about them?
Titel, of course, we've got to discuss Duke as well here. I put their profile on the right, and losing at St. John's. I mean, a home game at St. John's, was it not also for the Devils?
One of the most unlikely outcomes of the season, I really think, because St. John's comes in 0-11 in Big East play. I believe they got swept by the freaking Georgetown Hoyas, and then they beat Duke. It was competitive throughout and could have ended up with a Duke win. It was close at the end. Demore Pons playing like the conference player of the year, in my humble opinion, and kudos to Chris Mullen. I really didn't think – I don't know that he outcoached Coach K, but just to have enough bodies to throw out there with all the injuries they've had to deal with, it was really an amazing, amazing victory for the Giants.
Well, do you think that Duke got a little exposed in this loss here? I think this is something that other teams can look at, the way that a pretty bad Johnny's team that was 0-11 in Big East play could just beat them behind basically one player in Pons.
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying the formula is have some guy score 30 and hope Grayson Allen has a terrible night, sure, but I don't know how often that's going to happen.
Well, the other thing that also hurt Duke on Saturday was Marvin Bagley getting in foul trouble early in the second half.
Well, and that could be the key. Hey, you just take it at Bagley and hope you get him out of the game, and now it's just Grayson Allen and nobody left, isn't it?
I don't agree with that. Chad Carter's good. Duval's good. I mean, there's a reason they have all those Mickey D guys. Yes, you're going to have to step up. And to date, you have Allen the senior and Bagley the superstar taking those roles. But the talent is there. And I mean, I saw in Durham, you know, Allen had an awful day against Virginia, but Carter was just a man on a mission. So he can do the job when it happens.
But judging by Coach K's comments, he was more disgusted about how they did defensive-wise, especially with a game against a school 8 miles down the road looming later this week. They've got to kick into another gear.
I just brought up the schedule for next week here. It's a bunch of rivalry games this week, including coming up this weekend, Vatech at Virginia, North Carolina, NC State. But David, Thursday night, 8 o'clock ESPN, Duke at North Carolina. You have some fascinating facts for us about this game, I believe.
Well, a couple of things, too. These schools are only 8 miles apart. I mean, it's just I don't think that's pointed out all that often, but they're only 8 miles apart. And believe it or not, they've never played in the NCAA tournament. Never. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I don't think there is anything else that is pointed out as frequently as Duke and North Carolina being 8 miles apart and Duke and North Carolina having never met in the NCAA tournament, as if it's never been stated before. I mean, it's like, hey, did you know Christmas was on the 25th this year? I mean, like, I don't, but I mean, we're going to have a counter. I've always wanted to do this. We've never done it and probably won't do it this year, of how many times throughout the week as they run promos for it every night, and then during the actual game, they mention that these two schools are 8 miles apart and they've never met in the NCAA tournament. It's got to be about 50. There's only 40 minutes in the game.
Well, I'll tell you what, Joby, do you have a preview for us for this game? What do you think is actually going to happen in this game, other than it being completely overhyped for the next 48 hours or 72 hours till it happens?
the fact it's in Chapel Hill makes me think this is going to be a lot more competitive than the average person thinks. Because Duke is the better team right now, despite the St. John's loss. Duke's the better team. They've got more talent. They're playing actually better. North Carolina's slipping a little bit. But I think North Carolina might be able to put some things together. Particularly because Duke showed they have problems, as they showed New York this week, and they have problems with single scores. Maybe Barry's that scorer. Maybe this is one of those games where Barry just puts the entire team on his back and goes for it, and maybe Johnson shows up. He's shooting at home, so maybe that gets Johnson back into the rhythm. I feel like North Carolina's going to put up a bigger fight and actually maybe pull this off.
All right. I guess the other team with a big weekend, I know that your team, Joby, but Tytel, let me ask you about them. Virginia with a road test of Florida State, then home game against Va Tech this week. Probably the next two best games after the Carolina-Duke game, are they not?
It is. I would argue Virginia Tech also is a huge week because they host NC State on Wednesday night. I'll defer to Joby in terms of, is Virginia going to be at full strength, or do they still have that suspension going on?
They have the suspension going on for one more game, the Florida State game. I actually think the Florida State game is the toughest outside the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament, is the toughest game left on Virginia's schedule. I actually would, if I were gambling, I'd actually maybe put it in Tallahassee, or maybe put it on the guys from Tallahassee, because Florida State, I think, matches up pretty well with Virginia with some of the size inside. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. Then game day comes to Virginia for the third time in 4 years this weekend. Thank you, Michigan State, for having your little problems getting kicked out, having game day kicked out. And I think regardless of what happens in the Florida State game, I think the place will be hyped for that Virginia Tech-Virginia game. Virginia won't look past Virginia Tech, hopefully, but that's going to be – you're going to see Virginia clicking on all cylinders on Saturday night. The other team I would point out, by the way, would be, that we've just had is poor Louisville. They lost tonight, to Syracuse. They had to play 3 games in like 6 days. I mean, that's not easy, so you got to, including a quick turnaround with Virginia involved, which beats you up. So give Louisville some pause on that. I don't think they're done for the count. That's one thing I want to interject.
Well, they got a couple buys this week with Georgia Tech at home and at Pitt, so that's the good news.
Yeah, they'll be healthy. They'll get healthy quick.
I don't does Virginia Tech have a shot in hell? I mean, this isn't a bye game, but it could end up looking like one. Virginia is so much better than Virginia Tech, and they're at home. I could just see that being a massacre. Well,
what we're seeing, it's what I said earlier a couple of shows ago, is there are 6 teams around the bubble, in the ACC, though Notre Dame has fallen off. There are 3 teams I think are going to make it, 3 teams that are not. Virginia Tech this week, that NC State game, and the opportunity against Virginia. Virginia Tech will tell us, hey, I want to be in the top 3, not in the bottom 3. And we're going to find out by the end of the week what team they are.
Well, let's go over to the Big East, and I'm going to go right to a profile here. And Stalika, your Xavier Musketeers, another nice 2-0 week this week, and with both Duke and Kansas having lost games this week to teams that were not really in the field, or not even, or maybe barely on the bubble in Kansas's case, are your Musketeers slowly inching towards that 1 line?
They're getting closer to it, but I'd like to think that you could get a number 1 seed, not necessarily by avoiding bad losses like Kansas and Duke have done. They're still going to have to accomplish a little bit more to creep towards that 1 line. Winning at Butler and Creighton could certainly go a long way, but as we saw during the past week, they were living pretty dangerously at St. John's and against Georgetown, but when they absolutely had to have defensive stops and free throw shooting, it was there. In the overtime game against Georgetown, they hit 0 field goals, but were a perfect 10 for 10 from the foul line.
Well, Tytel, David actually put Xavier on the one line in a bracket he released this morning. Do you think this team is there, or let's say they do get this sweep this week at Butler at Creighton, would that put them there?
I was this close to putting them in over the Dukes and Kansases of the world after their upset losses. I just couldn't do it yet. I did pick them for my Final Four about a month ago, so I'm going to stick with it because why the hell not? If they can win 2 top 25 games on the road in conference play, that impresses me. I would look to the following week when they host Seton Hall and the number 1 team in the nation, see what they're really made of. You can make the argument that they're there. I think they're a 2, but they're right there.
I think the real committee would have them as a 2, but I mean, I kind of explained it. The one thing that's lacking from their resume that most number ones have is that they don't have that true road win against a protected seed. But if you line them up against Purdue, they've played a harder schedule. Yeah, they have one more loss, but in my opinion, it's a negligible loss when you're talking about losing at Villanova. Their losses aren't as bad. Their wins are better. Their schedule's harder. So why – I guess my question is, you mentioned Duke and Kansas. Well, what about Purdue? Why should Purdue be ahead of Xavier?
Because Purdue hasn't lost since, last year. I mean, they're ridiculous this year.
Xavier only has one more loss than Purdue.
I thought beating Arizona in the Bahamas was a fluke because everybody apparently beats Arizona in the Bahamas this year, but that was just the start of a great thing. Purdue, I understand they're beating up on the Rutgers of the world, and sweeping Maryland's nothing to write home about, but when you're beating Michigan twice, when you're beating Butler, when you're beating Marquette, Louisville, it's a really nice resume, I think.
And David, if I could just throw in
well,
here.
Xavier's also beaten, but yeah.
Dave, if I could just throw in here, since according to you, home wins don't even count, Xavier only has 2 Quadrant 1 wins, whereas Purdue has 5, so.
No, home wins don't count except when they count.
But I want to talk about Villanova, though. Joby, this Villanova team, all they did this week was go out and get a 20-point win over a very good Creighton team and almost was a 16-point win over a very good Seton Hall team. How good is this Villanova team at this point?
And this is without Booth. I mean, they are good. I mean, that goes without saying. It's fun watching, as the data geek among us, it's fun watching the Virginia Villanova, who's first, who's second in my own ratings, back and forth. It's like, okay, Virginia's going to go out and play. They beat Syracuse, on the road. All right, good job, Virginia. You're now number 1. Oops, sorry. No, now Villanova goes out. They beat Seton Hall. Sorry. No, now Villanova's number 1. It's a fun thing to watch. Both these teams are good. Villanova has certain – Jalen Brunson's the real deal. What else is there to say? The voters have him number 1. Can't disagree one. Half the metrics have him number 1. Half the metrics have Virginia number 1. It's fun.
But how many opposing coaches just basically went brown when they saw Omari Spellman hitting threes against Seton Hall? They now have 4 guys in their lineup in Jalen Brunson, Dante DiVincenzo, the aforementioned Omari Spellman, and also Michael Bridges that are all hitting over 40% from behind the arc.
Yeah, one of the things that I still love about this Villanova profile is that they have the loss at Butler, but it was – I think within that game, they went to sleep for part of it, and I think the fact that they cut a 23-point deficit down to about 6, I think that was still indicative that when they want to be and when they're playing to their ceiling, they're as good as anybody. But there are very few examples of this Nova team not winning by double digits, and one of them was at home against LaSalle, and I just love that.
Well, let me ask
they
you
had to sweat out with LaSalle.
One other team, and Sleek, let me bring you back in here. One other team we've got to discuss is Marquette. 4 losses in a row now, heading in the wrong direction. I mean, look at all those losses. Even though they're all up there in that first quadrant, there's just too many of them at this point, aren't there?
It's one thing when you're losing at Xavier and a tough one at home against Villanova. All the Sharks in the Big East were smelling blood in the water, and Butler and Providence were the teams that started picking at the carcass over the past weekend. Providence especially needed a road win themselves, and Butler now quietly has won 4 straight to go into a pivotal home match against Xavier tomorrow night.
And I guess, though, Titel, when you look at Marquette's upcoming schedule, the good thing is St. John's twice, Georgetown, DePaul still left. But they've got to do something with that game at Seton Hall or those 2 games against Creighton to get back in the picture, don't they?
If you look at the middle column, I mean, talk about a front-loaded schedule. Villanova twice, Xavier twice, Butler twice. I mean, that's ridiculous. The fact is, when you're 2-3 on the road and you have 5 of your next 6 conference games on the road, I do not love your chances.
And I'll be straight here as far as Marquette. I honestly think this is where St. John's finally gets off the schneid in Big East play. I mean, I'll be shocked as hell if they find a way to win at Villanova, but certainly the one against Marquette is there for the taking.
If they find a way to win at Villanova, I may die of shock. I might just collapse right then and there.
Here's the upcoming schedule. St. John's and Butler at Villanova hosting Butler as well. An interesting game coming up on Saturday. Xavier with a tough week as well at Butler and at Creighton, which we already mentioned. But let's move. David, go ahead.
A little bit of it. Can I ask Stalika a question about this Xavier Butler game? I always thought that this was going to be a budding, heated rivalry. It seems like it was more heated when they played a fixture out of conference series than it was when they got into the same conference. It just doesn't seem like the hatred is there. Am I wrong in that, or is it pretty heated?
I guess if you ask some of the Butler fans, they would probably tell you that some of the heat is dipped because they've quote-unquote moved on to beating Villanova, but rest assured, it should be a full house for tomorrow night.
Oh, it'll be a full house, yeah, for sure. But
and certainly would give Butler a chance at another signature win if they're able to pull it off. But at the same time, Xavier is the one team in the conference that's consistently had their number.
Yeah.
Well, here's the Big Ten now up on the screen. And, Joey, starting with this Purdue team who had to sweat it out at Rutgers, but did pick up the win, also beat Maryland, 12-0 in conference now. Just looking still – they got a little bit closer. They're still looking really good, aren't they?
Purdue looks – they, unlike another team that I use as my whipping boy, Sparty, they actually passed the eye test. I love what Purdue is. They are a 1 seed that I see by all accounts. What hurts Purdue is, once again, stare down at that RPI column. You know, Northwestern's lucky to not have 3 digits in it. Boy, the Big Ten overall is weak, and thus they can't pile up. Remember when I was talking about Villanova? Oh, Virginia goes out and wins against top 50 Syracuse on the road. Then Villanova goes out and they beat Butler. Oh, well, this is great. This is great. Purdue's going out and beating Rutgers. You know, it's just that's going to hurt Purdue in relation to getting the number 1 overall national seed. I actually think Virginia and Villanova might, as long as the loss would be to a top-tier talent, might actually have the ability to have a mulligan to not fall below Purdue in the pecking order, just because of Purdue's schedule.
Let's talk about that Michigan State team also real quickly. Titel, 2 more wins despite the off-court chaos at Michigan State, to say the least, which we discussed last week. They did come back and get that win over Indiana, also beat Penn State this week. Izzo just finds ways to win games, doesn't he?
It is. I give a lot of credit to Izzo for keeping the team focused because it could have all fallen apart because there's so much noise around them. Especially with the basketball team with the history in the past of guys like Appling and Payne and Walton and stuff. A lot of credit to Jaren Jackson Jr. I thought he kind of hit the freshman wall and was trending down. He seems to be getting back in gear, blocking shots. He's making shots. Really impressed. Miles Bridges, I thought that he was almost a lock for an All-American. I don't even know, I think he'll be first-team All-Big Ten. I don't think he's an All-American. His stats are very similar to last year, which is good because you never want to see somebody have a sophomore slump or anything. I really expect him to explode, and it's been more of a lateral move for him, I think.
All right. Well, Dave, this is a question I want to ask. We're going to ask it more later on this week in the Under the Radar show. It didn't really apply as much, I think, in the first two conferences we hit tonight. But is there somebody beyond those top four teams that you think could steal an automatic bid out of the Big Ten this year? Should a Purdue slip up in the conference tournament? Because you've got you've got 10 teams down there that are not looking like NCAA tournament.
Well, no, I mean, there's a couple. Well, there's one in particular, but I don't think they'll need the automatic bid because they're just going to be so safely inside the bubble. That is 10 miles in Nebraska.
They're actually.
Let's pull up that profile for a second here. Can we do that?
Pull up that buzzer for a second.
All right.
I'll put it up here for 1 second here. Here comes Nebraska.
Okay, here we go. And is that it? Oh, okay. Well, okay. See, we have problems here. Like that non-conference strength of schedule and RPI. That is incorrect. That is just the dark web conspiracy against them, making us think that that's what it is. Why are you? You're part of the problem. You are perpetuating the problem.
Let's move on to the upcoming schedule here in the Big Ten, and maybe we get some serious answers later on in the show. But Sleeka, there's the upcoming schedule of the Big Ten. Is there any games that you're really circling here? I guess the one on Saturday is the big one, right?
Well, Saturday is one of the big ones, but if you ask Buckeye fans, Ohio State and Purdue, this is going to be one of the biggest games that BTN has covered in their 10 years. But I also want to highlight something else that we're seeing on the graphic here. Notice Nebraska's position as part of the AP poll. There is an AP voter in Lincoln that actually voted the Huskers number 22 this week. So hence they got 4 points in the AP poll this week.
Damn right he did.
Yeah, but huge week actually for Purdue with hosting Ohio State at Michigan State, putting that 12-0 record on the line definitely. Let's go over to the Big 12 where Joby, Kansas had the unfortunate of having to play another home game this week. We can't hear you, Joby.
Joby.
Joby, we're losing
unmute yourself, Joby. Hold on. Can I do it?
Okay, we'll try to get Joby back, but
Joby is mute. There we go. Joby,
there
talk.
you go. Yeah,
there,
the fog
okay.
has become, and my microphone has become a fog.
Okay.
They are in a fog when they are playing at the fog. And who would have thought? We talk about Kansas with all this run of consecutive Big 12 titles, that it's not going to end this year. Who would have thought Mr. Beard and Texas Tech might be the team to take it from them? My goodness. Kansas is still a very good team. I don't understand why they're not doing this. Their resume is still strong, even with these losses. But especially since look at what they've done away from home. Away from home, they've been outstanding. And I think the committee looks at that, and passes. If you're saying one or the other, they'd rather see the road wins than discount your home losses, especially against the quality of opposition the Jayhawks have lost to. But wow, Kansas. Let's hope that their TCU, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and Texas games go better than what they've done recently.
It makes no sense. None. I don't even know how to evaluate it. Like our selection committee guessing expert, John Titel, do you suddenly give a team less credit because they won at Kansas than you would had they beaten Kansas at home? I've never seen anything like this. Not that I can remember. They have 5 losses. 4 were at home. That is stupefying.
Chad's right. It's hilarious to think that they don't have a home court advantage. As you see, 6-1 on the road, fantastic. It's just they've had such a track record of near perfection at home that even a stumble, I say stumble because they still could end up as a 1 seed, seems like a cause for concern because this team just never loses at home, and now they're losing at home multiple times in a season.
Let's also not lose sight of the fact that one of the reasons Kansas is tied with Tech in the Big 12 right now is because the Red Raiders also had a buzzer beater at home on Wednesday to beat in-state rival Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. And of the game that they lost, Like their one road game was at Oklahoma. They were ahead for the whole game. They actually had a better chance of winning that than any of the home games they've lost, I think. I mean, this is stupid. It is unlike anything I've ever seen before, and it's almost to the point to where we sit down as a committee, because, again, the real committee is going to be watching closely what we do. How do we evaluate this Kansas team and the teams that have won there?
I guess a profile that is a lot more normal for what you would be evaluating in a year, Titel, is this Oklahoma profile. But is there a cause for concern now that this team just cannot win a road game, losing another one this past week, and
losing at home right now?
Texas losing it. Now they're losing at home as we record this to West Virginia. But this Oklahoma team, I think, losing games on the road to unranked opponents and continually doing that.
Never a good thing, but as David said, I would focus on the here and now. They're losing as we speak live, and Trae Young does not have an assist, and we're in the second half. I mean, everyone knows he can score. We know he can pass because he's leading the nation in assists, and we know West Virginia and Press Virginia is the great defense. They're not going anywhere unless he has a balanced game and brings everybody and all his teammates along for the ride. And right now, they're keeping it close, but 0 assists, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Well, let's take a look at the rest of the upcoming schedule besides this game that's just going on tonight in the Big 12, where we see TCU at Kansas. So Kansas on alert there to lose a game.
Yeah. Oh God, I don't know. Like TCU has a real chance there. They got to take advantage of the road win at Kansas.
I guess, David, Oklahoma State with a home game against Baylor, then a road test at West Virginia. This Oklahoma State team now, with that win at Kansas, suddenly inching near the bubble, aren't they?
If they get those two, I think you would have to say they're right on the bubble. But again, still 4-6 overall. But yeah, if they win the next two, wouldn't you have to sort of think that they are just as good as this league is? Anybody that's 500 in it is at least on the bubble, I would think. Maybe not inside of it, but in the discussion.
Yeah, everybody there from the top 8 teams, that are 500, I think are all in the conversation still. Just such a deep league. Titel, move over to your conference here, Arizona. What happened? What happened in the Washington game?
They played a close game and got beat on a 3 at the buzzer on the road. I mean, I dropped them, I think, 1 seed line just because it's a loss. But I regret telling Rocco that I didn't think Washington was a tourney team because they're now, I think, inside the bubble by sweeping the Arizona schools.
Yeah, and Joby, here's that Washington profile. Now with the Arizona and the Arizona State home wins, they still have some of those predictive metrics are still horrible, including a BPI of 115. But you look at the resume side, it's a solid tournament.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at the resume. I mean, please, they are beating the teams and have. I mean, 2 wins against protected seeds with Arizona, and a quasi. This is a unique one, not at the Fog, but Kansas. Yeah, they're going to get a lot of credit for that. They're the only team to have done it this year.
You got to give them more credit because it wasn't at the Fog.
Yeah, so there's no excuses. Losses to Gonzaga and West Virginia in Quadrant 2, that's not real. Those are just fine losses. Stanford, okay, you're allowed 1. But Arizona State at home is a good win to make up for it. UC Davis, Belmont, Montana are all leading or right at the top of their conferences. Those are good Tier 3 wins. This is a solid NCAA tournament resume. And I think Washington might be now knocking at the 8-9 level, not even just, they're inside the bubble. I think they're starting to get to mid-tier level. We'll see how they finish out the season. The trips through the Oregon schools will be interesting, but they're done with the Arizona schools. They're done with USC. They're done with other, they can't stub their toe, but they have opportunities to really pile up a beautiful record if they win of these final 8 games, 7 of them is very realistic. They're sitting at 24-7 with some great wins. Wow, that's a pretty darn good resume.
And David, the other team I want to discuss in the Pac-12 is USC, who had been really playing well until they went and gave up that game at UCLA over the weekend.
Yeah, and again, you look at it. There's a lot of decent stuff here. The wins against Middle Tennessee, New Mexico State, away from home, and I think the win at Oregon is still pretty good. I don't know what Oregon's home record is off the top of my head, but I want to say they've only lost like 2 or 3 at home. So there's a lot of decent there, but nothing really good. And is there enough decent there to add up to good? I think they're right on the fringe of the bubble. When I did my bracket, although I'm not trying to guess the committee, they were one of the 2 last teams that I selected. Well, one of the 3 last. I expanded my field to 69 and took Nebraska. But they were one of the last 2 teams in. And I think that regardless of where you have them, maybe Titel can answer it better than I can. I just think they're right on the fringe.
Well, Titel, let's ask that question and ask you also how big a week this is for USC at the Arizona schools.
I believe it's pronounced ginormous. I don't think they're going to sweep. If they do, then put them right back inside the bubble. If they can get a 50-50 split, and I'm not saying exactly how that's going to happen, if you finish second in a conference, even in a bad conference, having a weak season, I think it's really good for the resume. But yeah, like Joby said, Washington is coming on strong, and as he said, the schedule. I don't think they're going to win 24 games. If they do, can Mike Hopkins come out of nowhere as a Coach of the Year candidate? Unbelievable.
Stalika, we only have 3 or 4 teams that are looking like NCAA tournament teams in this conference. So let me ask this question to you on this league. Is there a team that you're looking at that may be able to make a run in the conference tournament and at least put pressure on stealing a bit here?
If we're talking about just making a run here, I would still keep an eye on Utah. They've shown that they can win a couple big games, but they blew an opportunity at Colorado, so their at-large is basically done this year. I don't have confidence that Oregon is going to be able to win the tournament, but I think Stanford would probably be the most likely given sleeper, given that they've been able to beat some of the cream of the crop home and away.
Yeah, I like both those picks actually as potential sleepers to steal something. Joby, here comes the SEC, and talk about teams that just keep winning. How about Bruce Pearl and those Auburn Tigers?
They're my 4th number 1 right now.
Really?
They're leading one of the top conferences in the country. Their resume, pull up the resume. I see Tidel's shaking his head. But
see all those wins over Kentucky and Florida, Chad. Pull it up.
Yeah, fact is, losses.
Oh, there's no wins over Kentucky and Florida.
And a lot of road wins against NCAA tournament caliber teams. Yeah, they're going to have to prove some more. Yeah, they're going to have to prove some more down the stretch with that Kentucky game in 2 weeks. But they are piling up wins against quality opposition. Every time you go out, unless you're playing Vanderbilt or Ole Miss, you're getting a win against a team in consideration for the NCAA tournament, and they're winning. That is very few teams. Kansas isn't doing that. Duke is not doing that. They are.
Yeah,
Kentucky and Florida. I was going to say Kentucky and Florida are nice brand names, but I would say that win at Tennessee is a team that's been far more consistent.
Good win.
I was going to say, you say the exact same thing, Titel. Isn't the win at Tennessee the win over the second best team in the SEC?
Sure, it's a great win. If you're beating a ranked team by double digits, I don't have any problem with that. I just think that 1 seed is for the cream of the crop, and I think they're more croppy than creamy.
David, as far as the rest of the results here in the SEC, this Georgia team continues to just, what the hell are they doing? They beat Florida, they lose to Mississippi State, and lose bad.
Yeah, they're real inconsistent. I personally think that it's been more consistently bad than consistently good. I've never really had them solidly in my field. The more I look at them, the more I just don't think there's a whole lot there. at least when compared to the rest of the bubble. Now, I mean, if they do something ridiculous and get really hot down the stretch, then yeah, maybe they can sneak in. But I'm guessing that they won't.
Well, Joby, Mississippi State, garbage non-conference schedule, but nothing bad, and chances coming up. Can this team actually make a run at a tournament bid?
Yes,
No.
because they play in the SEC. They can. I don't. think
the opportunities are there, but they're not. Okay, sorry.
I don't think they're good enough to do it, but they certainly can. They have the opportunities, in front of them. Rocco has said this before, and I think he is right on the money on this, though. That non-conference strength of schedule, if it is a close call, they will be left out. But, you go out and do what they need to do. Don't lose to Vanderbilt and Ole Miss, but then take away the Vanderbilt and Ole Miss, and you sweep those games, and you go 3-3 or 4-2 in the remaining, and then win a game in the SEC tournament. They're going to have a gaudy record. And if you do that, you'll have some Tier 1 wins probably that populate the resume to go along with your Tier 2 wins, and not a lot of bad. That's the thing, is they don't have a lot of bad. They've taken care of business. Is that the sort of team that sneaks in? Who knows? We don't know what the rest of the bubble is. The non-conference strength of schedule might be their downfall, though.
And it's
won one game on the
with
road.
Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They're going to get their opportunities, though. They're playing a lot of their games. Yeah, if all they do is beat Alabama, and that's the only big win they have the remainder of the year, the Alabama home game, they're not going to do it. But they get at Missouri and at some other, tests that add to and populate to it.
David, here's the upcoming schedule in the SEC on the screen, and with Texas A&M, who we didn't mention yet, still looking better and better. We're circling that game Saturday suddenly a lot more than we were 2 weeks ago.
Probably, yeah. Texas A&M not just getting 2 wins, but actually looking the part in their last 2 games. They certainly need to string together more wins than that, but this is suddenly looking like a team that can take down Kentucky and get right back on track. They lifted a lot of weight out of conference. There's a lot of meat on that profile to where I think certainly because of what they did out of conference, they can overcome the slump that they had. And they win Saturday, which is very, very possible. What's that?
Can they win at Auburn Wednesday also? I mean, it's a huge week for A&M.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. But, I mean, I don't think they can win at Auburn. But, I mean, Auburn hasn't lost at home yet, have they? And they've looked really good. But I do think they can win on Saturday.
And I also want to highlight Tennessee and Kentucky because this is the Vols' chance to really get into protected seed territory a little bit more and also get a rare sweep against Kentucky.
Well, I went ahead and first here I pulled out the screen because we're going to go over to the American next, and
oh boy,
and I've got a little bit of a different screen I want to show you because yesterday, David hinted at this already, but yesterday Temple picked up a huge road win at Tulane, and I actually have video right here coming up on the screen.
Wow.
There it is. That is the feed of the celebration. David, tell us about this.
Well, this is just unbelievable. I mean, Temple got off to a really good start. They'd been struggling in conference, but they've strung together some wins. They just pulled off a huge road win on Sunday, and this is Philadelphia on Sunday night after that win at Temple, and it's just. The level of enthusiasm here is unbelievable. There were rumors of the hotel collapsing and an off-duty cop getting arrested. It's just, the city of Philadelphia, and this is your backyard, Chad. Maybe you can, show us a little more about it. But have you ever seen a team so alive for their Owls?
I've never seen that celebration. Well, Tell you went to school at the University of Pennsylvania. Your coach Fred Duff there for the Owls. What do you think about that celebration?
I think you're all wrong. The celebration was for the only team that's undefeated in Ivy League play, 5-0. Come on.
Okay. Oh, is that what it was?
Oh, that's what it is.
Those games
oh, okay, yeah.
Well, anyhow, let's actually talk about what actually did happen in the American this week. And David, let's go back to last Wednesday night, that Houston game where they looked like they had Cincinnati dead to rights, and then it fell apart on them.
Yeah, it was a switch flipping, and a lot of credit to Cincinnati. I know Cincinnati was at home, so once they got them, well, no, they weren't. I stand mistaken. That was a neutral floor game. I don't even think it was in the state of Ohio. Well, anyway, but still, for them to fall behind like that against a really good team, or at least a fringe bubble team, and then just come out and absolutely dominate the way that they did after that. I was as impressed with Cincinnati as I was anything else. Like when they finally turned it on, what level they were able to bring it to. Now, the other thing about Cincinnati, and I've been beating them up, and I'll continue to beat them up, is not just the lack of wins against teams that are solidly in the field. They haven't beaten anybody that's in the field, and I can't think of I can think of one. I think where Gonzaga got a protected seed with only one win against the team that made the field, but it's kind of rare. These are the kinds of teams, at least especially recently, that you've seen further down the seed list.
Well, Tytel, can you answer that? I mean, as a selection committee guessing expert, what does the committee do with this profile here, which really doesn't contain wins over anybody that's at least solidly in the field? Maybe the Houston win's their best win on there.
Yes, the Houston win is probably, I will go with that. The committee relaxes because it's early February and says, oh, you're going to SMU, to Houston. We're not mentioning UConn, and you're doing a home-and-home with Wichita. So we're going to wait and see. And if you're 30-2 in a month, then you're going to get a protected seed. And if you lose half those games and you don't have a great signature win on your profile besides Houston, then you're going down to like the 8-9 line.
I'd agree with that. And Stalika, this morning you made a comment on the website about this Temple team. Is there a case that this Temple team is inching towards the bubble here?
No. Please, no.
Honestly, if I were doing the bracket, I might have had them as my last team in because they've got 4 quality wins that are hey, they got 4 quadrant 1 wins, a couple decent quadrant 2. I mean, sure, they have a bunch of shit that stinks in quadrant 3, but at this point, all they need is quantity of wins. They have the quality.
Well, fortunately, their next 2 games are against East Carolina and South Florida.
They need to not stub their toe like they have in this quadrant 3. But if they do that, if all of a sudden you make a run, they lose only to at Wichita State, who they've already beaten, by the way, at home. You go, all of a sudden, they've got to go 6-1. But if they go 6-1, beat Houston at home, etc., then all of a sudden their biggest deficiency, which is their overall record, starts to go away. Yeah, quadrant 3 is still there, but they will have wins over 3 definite NCAA tournament teams and 2 protected seeds, which when you compare to the rest of the bubble, because that's what they're doing, will look relatively impressive. Now, can Temple do this? As evidenced by quadrant 3, there should be some serious doubts that they can go 6-1. But if they do, because they've produced against Auburn and Clemson particularly, they have an opportunity that maybe others in their similar situation do not, because they don't have the opportunities for the wins that Temple already has safely in hand.
Joby, I think if they do go 6-1 and they avoid a loss to a sub NCAA team in the conference tournament, that they will get in. My only thing is that going to happen? This has been a grossly inconsistent team, and going 6-1 would require consistency.
Well, here's the upcoming schedule in the American and Tytel. Huge week for SMU. It's just a team that's fading fast at Houston and hosting Cincinnati this week.
Big. Although I thought everybody was going to say huge week for Temple, beating up on East Carolina and South Florida. I mean, I hope they win those games.
I bet they lose one of them, and then they're going to win at Wichita.
Well, I hear that there is a plan for a huge parade in Philadelphia on Thursday. I may have to get canceled should East Carolina beat Temple. But let's take a real quick look at a few other teams here. And over in the A-10, where Rhode Island continues to just roll up wins, Joby, although they struggled with UMass.
A lot of people have struggled with UMass. UMass is the reason why we're having Georgia out right now. I mean, Georgia just taking care of business against UMass. Georgia probably be in most of our fields right now. So, yeah, I'll give a little bit. But, yeah, Rhode Island, they keep on keeping on. Yeah, they're pretty – talk about consistent despite, having a few close calls. They're winning the games. They're producing. They did enough out of conference with the Seton Hall and Providence wins to show, hey, this record isn't a complete fluke, even though you play in a down conference. Rhode Island deserves, a lot of credit here.
Well,
It is.
Titel. Go ahead, David.
I was gonna say, okay, maybe this. Well, I was just gonna say it is really hard to get excited about the upcoming games because the constant storyline is, can Rhodey continue to hold serve? And even for under the radar, there isn't even a team really making an NIT push right now, other than maybe the Bonnies.
Well, the question I was going to ask Titel here is, first of all, Rhode Island hosting Davidson this week, the second place team. But is there somebody, if Rhodey slips up in the A-10 tournament, that you look at as the team that could steal a bit out of this league?
Number one, screw you, Bonnies. I'm off your bandwagon and not getting back on. As far as Davidson, Rhode Island has not played them yet. They have beaten everybody else, so they are a legit threat. And the stat I like, so E.C. Matthews, their star preseason conference player of the year, missed 6 games earlier this year when the team went 4-2. They're 19-3 overall. So when he's healthy, 15-1. They're only lost by single digits at Nevada. This is a great team when healthy. Davidson will hopefully give them a run for their money just to make it competitive. But as Davidson's tempo is in the 300s, I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, not much of a run for their money. We talk about actual runs, more of a slow down for their money. But let's go to the Mountain West. John, this Nevada team also picked up a win over Fresno and a win at Colorado State. 2 more wins this week for them, while Boise had to sweat out Vegas but got their win there also.
I assume you meant that for me, right?
John Slika, yes.
Yep, that was a little bit of a sweat as far as the Broncos go. They stay alive, although UNLV, the metrics will still probably show that as a 102 win, even though that was at home. I would even say the surprise this week was Wyoming getting pasted at home by Fresno State. This was the same Wyoming team that's beaten both Boise and Nevada at 7,220.
Well, David, what about this Boise State profile? Nothing in Quadrant 1, but nothing. I mean, only the Iowa State loss on the bad side of things. Well, what do you do with a profile like that? Although I would note they do still have the one Nevada game left.
Well, what the committee has done in the past is not select teams like this. Kind of thinking back to examples, I want to say that there was a year where Nevada coincidentally got – I remember them not having a win against a top 50 team at all and getting a 7 seed, but that was a little bit of an anomaly, and I think that they were actually – ranked in the top 10 that particular year that happened. Boise certainly not ranked in the top 10. I think it's a good Boise team. I think that their profile is more circumstantial than it is how good they actually are. And I know that you and I probably feel that way about several under the radar teams in any given year. I could make the case if I had to. Oregon pretty strong at home. Fresno pretty strong at home. I do think that they're better than a lot of the teams that are probably going to end up inside the bubble but on the bottom half of the bracket. But, again, Titel's the expert. This is typically the profile that does not get selected.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Joby, if somebody – do you see somebody that could steal the bid in this conference then if we're only going to have one team that looks like they could be inside the bubble come Selection Sunday?
I think there's a lot of talent in this conference. I think, as pointed out, Boise would be a candidate. Wyoming's getting wins. They're not going to be playing at the highest location in D1 when it happens. But you've got teams that can pull off games. San Diego State, Wyoming, even Fresno. But I truly believe if you give me Nevada or the field, in most conferences I'm taking the field against the favorite. Even where Villanova and Virginia are running away, I take the field. But in that case, not here. I'm taking Nevada.
All right. Last conference we're going to hit for the night. Quickly, Stalika, let me bring you in here. St. Mary's had a 2-0 week, although they sweated out San Diego. Gonzaga finally found a way to beat BYU at home.
Yep, that was the first time the senior class for Gonzaga actually got a home win against the Cougars. So that broke a 3-game winning streak that BYU had there. So that's pretty much going to set the table for actually a real rivalry as part of rivalry week, and that'll be the Saturday night matchup where Gonzaga goes to St. Mary's.
Yeah, and David, I just put both their profiles on the screen here, and I understand that Gonzaga did more out of conference with the Ohio State and the Texas.
A little bit, yeah, slightly more, yes.
But if you look at the top 25s, these teams are 11 and 12 at both polls. Do you think that Gonzaga is 3-4 seed lines better than St. Mary's?
I think their profile is. It's hard for me to say. I do know there's no getting around the fact that St. Mary's won at Gonzaga. Had they not done that, I wonder if I'd even have them in the field at all. And that's one of the things I can't get past. They did have the home win against New Mexico State, and it was decisive. But I guess I'm just not overly impressed when you kind of go down the list here. And I mean, they have essentially proven that they can dominate teams outside the RPI top 100. I don't know, but I guess the win at BYU is good. I'm really, I guess maybe, again, I'm just looking more at the profile than at the team, but I'm really bothered by this profile. They have four wins against the RPI top 100. That's absurdly ridiculous.
Tytel, what do you think about that? Should St. Mary's really be looking at the 8 or the 9 line because of that lack of quality wins?
I think Saturday is they do have a lack of quality wins, so I will not sugarcoat that. If they can beat Gonzaga at home, considering they've already beaten them on the road, I expect them to shred the rest of the conference. They could enter conference tournament 29-2, and if they can sweep Gonzaga 3 times, which I don't know if any team's ever done that in Mark Few's life, we're talking like a 31 or 32 win team with your 2 losses to power conference teams, neutral site, back in late November with a little turkey hangover by a combined 7 points. I'm not saying they're a 3 seed. I think they're like a 5 or 6, though, just because there's so many. They're 9-0 on the road.
Of course, the big game this week is the one we already talked about, the Gonzaga at St. Mary's game. But I guess on that note, let me pull this down here. We've got a few minutes left here, not much, but I want to run through one other topic real quick, just for each of you. Tytel, let me start with you because you're on my screen right now. Who would you think both the player of the year / rookie of the year, and it might be the same guy, is so far? And the second question is going to be, who's the coach of the year so far?
So despite our good friend Matt's protestations a month ago that Marvin Bagley was the best player, he was wrong. It is Trae Young, and even if he loses tonight at home, which it looks like he might because he's not passing the ball, he could lead the nation in scoring and assists, which never happens. Do it as a freshman is amazing. It's not like he came in with a Final Four team. He came in with an Oklahoma team that was terrible last year. I believe a losing record. He's maybe hitting the wall, and he needs to work on the shot selection, but he's just great. As far as coach of the year, I'm going to go – I'm thinking Bruce Pearl, but I just can't do it because I think he's not the nicest guy in the world and recruiting and everything. So I'm going to go with –
Wow. Bruce Pearl got buzzed.
So I'm going to go with Chris Holtmann, who I would argue might not even be the best coach in this conference because Matt Painter is having the career season at Purdue. But Holtman comes in. I do not love first-year coaches just because I think it takes time to get everybody on the same page. All he does is start 9-0. He had the hiccup with Penn State. I don't know what's going to happen at Purdue on Wednesday. Maybe they're going to lose by double digits. He lost his front line of Mark Loving and Torian Thompson, and he just rebuilds and reloads with the guys and turns Keita Bates-Diop into a legit All-American candidate. Chris Holtman is my pick for National Coach of the Year.
Well, I personally agree with you on Young for Player and Rookie of the Year. I think you got the right first name for the Coach of the Year, but David, I think the last name should have been Beard and not Holtman, shouldn't it?
Chris Beard has done a phenomenal job. And is it a single season job, or is it just the accumulation that he's done ever since going there? You and I were fans of his when he was at Little Rock. I think the fact that Little Rock won a round of 64 game when he was there and hasn't even been 500, I don't think, since he left is a testament to how much he meant to that program. And he took over a Texas Tech team that wasn't really set up for this kind of success and that no one was really expecting. And that when you look throughout Texas Tech's history, yeah, they've been to tournaments. I think they've been to a Sweet 16, but they haven't spent this much time ranked in the top 10, ranked this high, and I don't even recall them ever being a protected seed. Maybe they were once, or maybe they have been, but not that I remember. So not only is he doing a hell of a job, he's having an unprecedented season at a place that never really expected to have any.
Well, Joby, you want to chime in on these issues here, both the Trae Young as Player of the Year and
not my Coach of the Year though.
I'll continue to go with the Trae Young parade that people have done. I'm going to do a homer. Chris Beard's a great call, but Texas Tech was preseason picked to finish 6th in the Big 12. Preseason pick number 6 in the ACC was the team who's number 2 right now and undefeated in the ACC. This is the best coaching job. It's a homer call, I know, but this is the best coaching job of already 2-time ACC and 1-time National Coach of the Year, Tony Bennett.
Yeah. Salika, you want to break the tie here or go somewhere else?
I'm going to go in a different direction in both instances here. I think for Player of the Year, I think we have to go Jalen Brunson as far as Villanova. He seems to go completely under the radar because of the Young discussion. And we talked so much about Phil Booth being out of the lineup for Villanova. It would really change drastically if they lose a guy like Brunson, though. But as far as Coach of the Year, I think it's in the ACC, but I would actually look at Brad Brownell at Clemson because they actually lost their best player in Jaron Blossomgame coming into the season. They had the Dante Grantham injury midseason, and they've actually managed to improve where the parts have been, or the sum has been greater than the parts for the Tigers this year.
That was also going to be my pick. It's kind of crazy. Like, I agree with Joby. He would have been my second pick. And I keep saying, I know you guys might not agree with me. I think Tony Bennett's a pretty good coach. I think he's fairly decent. He might be going places. But Brad Brownell, especially when you look at just the frustration of last year and when it looked like they were losing a lot of what contributed to the team being even as good as it was last year. No expectations this year. They get on a roll. You get the sense that when you watch them play and they win these close games that they are really like overachieving to do what they're doing. And then they have like that huge wrench thrown into the gears with the injury that Stalika mentioned, and yet they're still winning. I mean, I've always been a fan of Brad Brownell. I've liked him since he was at Wright State, and then actually at UNC Wilmington before that. Most people don't remember, but he had UNC Wilmington on the 9 line. You want to talk about getting an under-the-radar team way inside the bubble. Had a real good year that year, and multiple times getting them inside the bubble. So he's been successful, and I think this is his best coaching job of his career, bar none, and that is who I would vote for Coach of the Year.
Well, I'll tell you what, on that note, let me run through each of you for any other final thoughts. And Sleek, let me go back to you. Start off with you.
If you want to look at Xavier as a model of consistency, their win against Georgetown puts them at 9-2 in the Big East. So this is going to be the 36th consecutive year that they are going to be at least 500 or above in conference play. I believe the second closest is going to be Kansas, which is going to be up 31 straight seasons of their own in Big 8 and Big 12 play.
That is
Wow.
remarkable.
That is remarkable. I never do not realize
Wow.
that. Titel, you want to pull up that stat with your own thoughts?
I can't top that, and we already discussed it, but I just want to urge people on Saturday to watch the Gonzaga-St. Mary's game, 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. This is a big rivalry week with Penn and Princeton, of course, and you got Duke and Carolina and all the others. This wasn't really a rivalry last year. Gonzaga swept the Gales 3 straight, all by double digits. This year, a 3-point game, and I think the rematch is going to be even better, and I think the conference tourney title game, which we're all assuming could be the best of them all. It's nice to see that this is a competitive rivalry. And Jock Landale, we didn't talk about him. If his team goes 30-2, like, you got to at least consider him for National Player of the Year.
So you're not kind of BYU to ruin everybody's day and crash the party. Joby, your final thoughts.
Chad, could you pull up the comparative screen of 2 teams?
Absolutely.
Type in Rhode Island and type in Michigan State.
Here it goes.
And everybody says the 4th team or their number. Every week I'm going to pound this Emperor has no clothes component over and over again.
Michigan
The
State.
resume for Sparty is almost as bleak as their eye test right now. I don't like the way that they play. I don't like their resume. It's identical. It's identical to Rhode Island. I mean, literally.
What do you got against Rhode Island? What's wrong with Rhodey?
I mean, Rhode Island is a solid, team, but we're wondering if they're a protected seed. They're on the border. Are they protected seed or not they protected seed?
No.
There is one difference, though. Rhode Island actually leads their conference.
I'll tell you,
which is the benefit.
Joby, I disagree
I'm
with you that
just
they are.
saying,
Joby,
Michigan State is not a 1 seed. They are not a 2 seed. We should be talking about them in terms of 4-5, just like we are with the Rhode Island Rams.
I completely disagree with you, Joby. These are not identical profiles. Michigan State has a non-conference strength of schedule of 237. Rhode Island has a superior profile.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
David, you want to finish us off?
I say this every year, and I'll say it again. The Super Bowl is over. College basketball is the biggest sport in the country as of today, and it will be for this next 8 weeks until the night of the national championship game. Regardless, selfishly, I kind of wish college basketball would move its calendar back a couple weeks so it gets 10 weeks in the sun instead of 8. But it's just, again, the perfect timing. Between now, we're into the latter half of conference play where most teams are starting the second half. So the races are really heating up. It's great storylines all the way up and down the leagues. All 32 of them, or most of them anyway. And it's just, I think college basketball, it is, as a fan, my favorite sport. And I think from now until the end of the year is my favorite part of the season, although I always say that every part of the season is my favorite part. This one's kind of exceptional. And it's just, like I say every year, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun coming on here each week with you guys. And then in a few weeks when we start the championship week notebooks every night, it's just going to be fun. Looking forward to it.
Well, David, I have to disagree with you as well. Even though the Super Bowl is over, college basketball, unfortunately, for the next 2 weeks is not going to be the number 1 sport.
Yes, it is.
This is it right here on the screen. Olympics start Thursday night.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
On that note, on behalf of John Stalika, Joby Fortson, David Griggs, and myself, Chad Sherwood, John Titel, did I get everybody? Have a great night, everybody. The U.S. Women's
Did you see that shot?
Have a great night.
Oklahoma, yeah.